discussion. But the first thing is that enumerator jobs are really hard. So I think many of us who are like principal investigators or who work on research projects will go visit the field on a day with good weather, and we'll hire a car, and everything will seem like, oh, this is easy. We'll sit in on one interview or two interviews. Well, oh, this is easy, stuff. But the people who do this work day in, day out, no matter what the weather is, the weather is difficult, traveling is difficult, finding the right respondents is often difficult, when and how to ask the right questions is often difficult. And there are many, many, many temptations that are faced by the people doing this work. And it's because they're human. The people doing this work are human beings. And, some of them may sit under a tree. The classic image is someone sitting under a tree faking interviews, or they're on the bus traveling to the village and they're filling out the survey booklets. But, it's much more common, we find, that there's a lot of effort to find exactly the right respondent. There are 50 people in this village with essentially the same name, and you're looking for one of them, and it takes a long time, and it's very frustrating. So it's easy to end up just interviewing the wrong respondent if you just put in a little less effort. Or auto-answering questions. So, sometimes there's a question like, have you taken a loan in the last 12 months? And if you answer no to that question, it's a very happy thing because you get to move on. And if the respondent says yes to this question, then there's like another 30 minutes of, what was the interest rate? What did you do with this loan? There's just a world of hurt that descends. And it's the end of the day, you're exhausted, your respondent has, sick children screaming, why not say no? So the temptation there is very, very strong. And then also, from a research point of view or from the government point of view, you may know that only 1 in 100 people is going to answer a certain way to a question. And most people answer one way, very few people answer another way. From your point of view, looking at the total data set, the 1 in 100 answer is important to you. Is it 1%, is it 2%? That's important. From an enumerator point of view, you ask this question 20 times. It's been a week you've been asking this question. Every time they say the same thing. You get to think, it's actually wrong to keep bothering people, asking them this question, when you know the answer to this question. So this sort of auto-answering thing, it's very subtle. It's not, they're not malicious. They don't think of themselves as committing fraud or violating the integrity of the research or anything else. They're just human beings. So knowing that these things happen and knowing that this is the reality, you have to sort of design things in a certain way. And so, and these are some of the areas where digital technologies really help us. So things like skipping irrelevant questions. So following the right skip patterns, figuring out which questions get asked, so following the instructions of, this module is only asked of these people under these circumstances. Like figuring all that out is incredibly difficult. It is a lot of work for people. So you can reduce this work by programming this into the survey so that, it knows this is a 12-year-old girl or this is a, 40-year-old male, and so I don't need to ask a bunch of questions about pregnancy. You can build in checks. You can constrain responses. So if they put in 222 for the age, you can say, no, that's not a valid age, and they probably just hit the 2 button an extra time. It was probably 22. So you can catch these things so that they don't have to be spending all night, reviewing their surveys to catch all of these things and fix all of these things. So in particular, you can design for monitoring and create incentives. So there are field management systems, and I think many of you in this room, I'm sure, know better than I do the field management procedures for field supervisors, checking in on your interviewers. You might do back checks or revisits where some percentage of households you go send somebody else afterwards to check did this enumerator visit, did they not visit? You might ask them a few random questions and then check the responses against the original responses to see did they ask these questions. But these things are highly, highly imperfect methods of monitoring. I mean, they're sort of the best you could do in the paper and pencil world. But in the digital world, you can do things like audio recording. So there's one guy at JPAL a couple years ago who said to me once, when we were using digital technology, he said, these devices, they all have microphones. Why don't you turn them on? And it was sort of such a simple idea. And we thought about it, we're like, yeah, I guess we could turn the microphones on. And so we added a feature where you could set up and say, okay, well, for 5% of interviews or 10% or whatever, at some random point or focused on a certain area that you're particularly concerned about, audio record at random some portion of the survey and save that. And you can also do things we call speed limits, where you can say, this is another sort of simple thing, you say, hey, well, if they're moving through the survey too quickly, that's kind of suspicious. And so you can have the tablet or the phone record, automatically flag these interviews and say, you know, they were moving too quickly. And in fact, you can have it automatically turn on the microphone when it sees this kind of behavior, so that later when you're looking at the data, you can see this guy spent only, 3 milliseconds on this question, and you can also listen in to hear, okay, well, was he just a really fast talker, and or was there, something else going on? Were they not actually interviewing anyone at all? You can record the GPS positions and automatically calculate the distance between where you think the interview should have taken place and where the interview did take place. You can have automated checks where you check this kind of yes/no question of did you take a loan in the last 12 months? You can set something up to very easily just monitor statistically and say, okay, well, tell me when there's an enumerator or a T that's answering this question systematically differently. So, if you've got one guy who's out there and for some reason, 90% of people say no, they haven't taken a loan in the last 12 months, but everybody else is, around 20%, then that's something that you want to follow up on. And so, these kinds of things, there are all kinds of ways in which you can use this digital technology so that you can facilitate the monitoring, the review process, so that, and also create the right incentives. When people know that they're being audio recorded at random, you can even, for example, have everybody listen together to some of the audio recordings at the end of the week as a learning exercise. And nobody wants to be embarrassed that they were skipping questions or they were not asking the questions properly. So you don't need to fire people, you don't need to create a lot of drama. You just, by instituting these kind of quality control procedures, you incentivize them to do the best work that they can do. And create the structure that will give you the kind of data that you want.